the Spirits Podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week, we pour a drink and learn about a new story from around the world. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Julia. And Amanda, we've talked about a lot of cool goddesses so far in Denial Isn't Just a River in Egypt. It's what we've been doing by keeping an Egyptian Mythology Series from you on Spirits Podcast by Spirits Podcast. Don't worry, I remember the bye now. We've talked about the loving and gorgeous Hathor. We've talked about the wiles of Isis and how she's the baddest bitch in charge. But I think in terms of badassery, no one quite beats out the goddess that we'll be talking about in this episode, Sekhmet.
You know, Julia, if it takes like several Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of beer to take me down, I think I'm the most badass goddess in the room. And that's true of Sekhmet.
I agree. And for people who are not Amanda, who are like, that name sounds familiar, but I can't exactly place it. This is not our only mention of her, obviously. In Denial Isn't Just a River in Egypt. It's also what we've been doing by keeping an Egyptian Mythology Series from you on Spirits Podcast by Spirits Podcast.
By Spirits Podcast.
But also the real conspirators know that we did an episode about her years ago to coincide with the release of a video game.
Yeah, I think it was to do with an Assassin's Creed video game set in ancient Egypt.
It was indeed. And she does make an appearance in that game, which is why we did a story about her in the first place. But we are revisiting this goddess with new eyes and new appreciation and with the context of what we've been talking about in the series so far, because she is so damn cool and she deserves a revisit.
Absolutely. I think 410 some episodes in, Julia, we are allowed to revisit with new eyes and ears. And I would say a deeper appreciation of badass goddesses than even I had before.
The world has changed since the last time we talked about this, and so we have changed.
The horrors persist, but so do we, Julia.
That is true. So in this episode, Amanda, we'll be talking about the lioness herself, a goddess of two distinct sides of the coin, a dangerous and destructive side, and one that is nurturing, protective, and healing. So let's dig into her, shall we?
Let's go.
We'll start with another epithet corner because I think her various titles will give you a great picture of what to expect in this episode. So keep in mind the name Sekhmet actually translates to powerful or powerful female one. But she is known by many other titles, and I want you at home and you yourself, Amanda, to tag yourself as to which one you would want to be known as.
Okay, I'm ready.
We have She Who Dances on Blood, the one that wields the knife, She Who is Powerful, the serpent who is upon her father, the one that loves Ma'at, the bloodthirsty, she before whom evil trembles, mistress of dread, the mauler, lady of slaughter, lady of pestilence, and finally, the red lady. So many of these would be amazing wrestler nicknames.
They really would. I think evil trembling before me is the energy I am bringing into 2025. And that's going to be me on this one.
She before whom evil trembles. It's pretty good. It's pretty dope.
Tremble. Bow down.
I'm a big fan of the first two, which is She Who Dances on Blood and the one who wields the knife.
That's really good. That's
really good. Because that can also refer to the fact that, like, I cook a lot.
Very true. Double duty.
Not the blood one, just the knife one.
I mean, you know, hopefully blood isn't making its way onto your kitchen floor, but if it's a part of your cooking, then, you know, sometimes you got to do it.
Yeah, I am not in a place where I am butchering myself in my kitchen, so I'm hoping there's no blood on my floor besides maybe my own, but I'm also not hoping for that either.
Yeah, something's gone wrong if that's true.
Yeah. With these very elaborative descriptors, Amanda, I think we get a really good image of who Sekhmet is, but let me go on to describe her a little bit more, because she is, unsurprisingly, another semi-anthropomorphic goddess. She's usually a woman with a lioness's head.
Lioness with titties.
Yes, lioness with titties. Well, actually, we'll talk about the titties in just a second. So she is usually portrayed as wearing a long braided wig, and she has a solar disc balanced atop her head, which is a reference to her role as the Eye of Ra and her association with the solar god. Something we will be talking about a lot towards the end of this episode. Often, she is seen wearing a long red dress, and she was referred to in this image, in this form, as the mistress of red linen.
Hell yeah.
I like that. So this style of dress was actually most common in Lower Egypt, which ties her to that particular region. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it is important that she is from this specific area. And sometimes the dress that she is wearing has these little like rosettes or stars over each of her nipples. So the titty is not free, unfortunately.
But the titty is adorned as it deserves to be.
Yes, she's basically wearing the ancient Egyptian equivalent to pasties.
Yeah. But pasties and a dress, which I think just tells me that if the dress leaves at any point during the day, we're still rocking and rolling. We're still ready to go. We don't have to go home.
Ready to go. Yeah. No, I get it. I am a big fan of the pasties when wearing a tight dress or one I simply don't want to wear a bra with. And so I like that I'm being represented by Sekhmet here.
I love it.
So these actually do have some sort of reference. Some scholars believe that they are supposed to be replicating the hair that lions have on their shoulders that has a very distinct pattern to it.
Cool.
Others believe that it is a reference to the shoulder stars that make up the constellation of Leo, though that might be from the Greek astronomical influence later on after the colonization of Egypt by Greece. In her statues, she is usually either seated or if she is standing, she is holding a papyrus scepter, which is another symbol to represent her ties to Lower Egypt.
Very cool.
And her appearance, especially her lion head, was used somewhat similarly to the way that Medusa's appearance was used by the Greeks, which is it was used for warding off and also implying the divine protection of a building or a person when it adorned it.
Very cool. For me, that would be a sign that there are some other cool witchy bitches around that I want to hang out with. And I think that is a very useful double signifier.
I agree. Yeah, they in the source that Researcher Sally provided, they kept referring to it as an aegis, which is a very Greek thing. So the kind of implication of Greek influence on that is interesting, I think. So you will most likely remember the origins of Sekhmet from our Hathor episode, as she is said to be an aspect of that goddess, but over time, they actually evolved into separate deities that were worshipped individually, rather than Sekhmet always being an aspect of Hathor. Now, as her worship grew in popularity, Sekhmet actually began to be associated with Bastet, the cat goddess, especially around the Middle Kingdom era.
Well, Julia, the little kid grows up to a big lion.
Yes, or rather, lion becomes domesticated, becomes little cat. And additionally, Sekhmet began to take on the attributes and identity of the goddess Mut, who we've talked about a little bit in previous episodes, but she is one of the creation goddesses who we've mentioned once or twice. She's like the primordial water goddess. But you will remember that Sekhmet is the daughter of Ra, especially when she is in that aspect of Hathor. But even when she is her own goddess, she is seen as this both daughter of Ra and the eye of Ra. Now, you'll remember that Ra was getting old. His mortal subjects began to plot against him, etc., etc. We will get to that story later on in this episode with a little bit of a new retelling, a new twist to it at the end.
I'm already feeling the eldest daughter energy.
Excellent. So when it comes to her historical origins, however, those are a little hazy compared to some of the other gods and goddesses that we've talked about with Egyptian mythology. We know that her worship most likely originated in the Nile Delta because this area does not have a large lion population. And so they were considered these like mysterious and magical beasts. So they were perfect for the embodiment of a goddess that was feared and revered.
Makes sense to me.
Yes, I love this idea of like, imagine you're living in a place that does not have a large... Actually, no, this is a great example. Imagine you are from like a city or something like that. And you are like, you know what is like a really like majestic creature, a real like creature that, you know, represents nature and the forest. Deer. Deer are so majestic, so beautiful, so regal. And then you see a deer in real life and they are just some of the dumbest creatures in the world. And you're like, of course, someone who doesn't have deer around them thinks that deer are cool.
Julia, it's like when my Australian friends visited the U.S. When I was going to college, and they were like, oh my God, a squirrel. I can't believe it. They're so beautiful. Could we watch them? And I'm like, I guess, dude.
Yeah, you want to watch some rats in the subway while we're at it too?
It was yellow school buses, post boxes, and squirrels. And I was like, all right, I could do all three for you all in the same corner.
Yeah, the Australians love a squirrel. They just love a squirrel.
Bless them.
So the earliest recorded mention of Sekhmet is from the city of Memphis, not the one in the United States, the ancient city of Memphis in Egypt that the United States city is named after.
That was a jump scare, Julia.
I'm sorry. Can you imagine? That'd be wild. So in this earliest recorded mention, she is said to be the wife of Ptah, who we'll talk a little bit about later, who is the patron god of artisans. And she was also said to be the mother of two other gods that we will talk about again a little bit later. But in this recording, she's also referred to as the firstborn of Ra. So again, you're right, Amanda, in saying that she has oldest sibling energy because she was the oldest sibling.
Listen, if your parent calls you their eye, you know you're the eldest daughter, okay? You know it.
You know you're about to parent those other kids.
Mm-hmm.
So by the New Kingdom, she was being worshipped alongside Ra and one of her sons, Nefertum. And they were known as the Memphite Triad. And their worship was strongest, obviously, when Memphis was the capital of Egypt, which was around the 18th and 19th dynasties.
May I propose any drag queens in and of Memphis, Tennessee, call yourself the Memphite Triad. And then you can be, your drag name Triad as your last name, which I think would be absolutely fabulous. And just shout me out when you're on Drag Race, okay?
I would love that. That'd be really good. If you decide you want to go with that drag name, tag us. Tag us on the socials.
We'll be your drag godmothers, okay?
I'll allow it.
I know nothing about makeup, but I will support you at every show.
So this actually leads us nicely into how Sekhmet was worshipped. And she was worshipped quite a bit in many major cities like Luxor, Memphis, Letopolis, and all through the Nile Delta. And at her temples, she was often offered a blood sacrifice from sacrificed animals, not people, which was said to placate her rage and contain her anger. Now, when her needs were met, if her needs were met, it was said that her worshippers could control their enemies and would gain the vigor and strength that allowed them to overcome weaknesses and illness.
Delightful. I'd love to siphon some of my enemy's energy for myself.
And Amanda, the really cool thing is the reason we know about this is because there are a lot of surviving statues of Sekhmet. And there's a reason behind that as well, which is there is evidence that many different statues of Sekhmet would be erected at her temples because each day the ritual to appease Sekhmet had to be done to a different statue.
Interesting.
So, for example, in Amenhotep III's temple, there were at least 700 statues of Sekhmet.
Oh my God. And so it was somebody's job to figure out and keep track of the fact that we did, that one yesterday. And so this one has to be today.
Yes. And also keep in mind that the Egyptians actually had a really distinct calendar. And so they had these lucky and unlucky days. They had a really good ability at record keeping. So it was important that you knew that Sekhmet is for that day. This Sekhmet is for this day.
Incredible. And reminds me of the fact that all of my Instagram ads are for Millennial Core pill cases. And I do have a rainbow pill case and I really enjoy her. But the fact that one was advertised to me yesterday, that was the print of a 90s bowling alley carpet. I was like, oh no, I do want it.
Yeah, that's actually really good.
I was like, damn it, it's really good.
So there is just, because of sheer numbers, we have a decent amount of surviving art of her.
That's
so you'll see at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Amanda, there are several lion statues in the Temple of Dendur area. Mm-hmm. Those are Sekhmet statues.
Hell yeah, dude.
And so we have a lot of these just because there were a lot of statues. And in some temples, specifically the temple at Leontopolis, which is the city of lions, the priests actually kept tamed lions and lionesses as living images of Sekhmet.
Damn.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
You say tame, and I feel like it's going to have a lot of air quotes around it, but damn.
I think the way that zoos have tamed animals, for sure.
I mean, listen, if I'm figuring out, if I'm an impressionable teen in ancient Egypt and I'm feeling, a little bit goth, a little bit mad at the world, I'm going to go to the temple with live fucking lions. And then my parents will be like, oh my God, so devoted, so great, love her eldest daughter. And I'll be like looking at the blood sacrifice and being like, this is great.
I think that live lions would definitely like lure in a lot more people to religion if like churches and temples had more of those these days.
I mean, consider it.
Just saying. So not only was her worship used to appease the goddess, but her specific priests were actually associated with the magical aspect of medicine. So physicians and priests would actually work side by side in order to heal the sick. And when illness broke out in a city, such as like an epidemic or something like that, rituals would be done to appease Sekhmet. And there is a reason behind that.
Tell me why.
So there is a spell called the Book of the Last Day of the Year, which was recited over a piece of cloth, which was worn around the neck any like potentially dangerous time of year's end. And on the Egyptian New Year's Day itself, many Egyptians would exchange presents, often in the form of amulets, to Sekhmet in order to pacify this goddess. Now, this appeasement of Sekhmet, especially around the end of the year, had to do with the increase in infectious diseases that tended to correlate with the transition from the old year to the new year. Kind of like nowadays where we're like, oh, it's the holiday season. Everyone gets sick when the season changes or like just because it's cold out.
Seeing
and stuff
a bunch
like
of people
that.
you don't otherwise see, etc.
Yes, exactly. So this is also because the ancient Egyptians believed that Sekhmet had a cure to every problem, and that staying on her good side by offering food and drink and worshiping her would allow them to have a direct connection to the goddess and have their prayers answered.
Incredible. I picture Sekhmet sitting back and being like, listen, I'm not saying I can cure your entire town, but like bringing more beer and blood is going to be useful for you.
It would be nice. Just a little extra lamb, a little extra meat. That would be nice. I'm just saying. Now, Amanda, I want to tell you a little bit more about Sekhmet, her association with illness, how she was worshipped in ancient Egypt. But before we get to that, I'm going to need to grab a refill.
Me too. Let's go. Hello, everybody. It's Amanda. Welcome to The Refill. Thank you especially to our newest patrons, CRH, Naji, and Grace. We so appreciate you taking the time to support us, to give us some of your hard-earned money to make sure that we can keep paying our team and making this show and bringing you such incredible badass goddess stories. Thank you as well to our supporting producer-level patrons, Alicia, Ann, Hannah, Jane, Lily, Matthew, Captain Jonathan, Malachi, Cosmos, and Scott, and our legend-level patrons, Audra, Bex, Chibi Yokai, Michael, Morgan H., Sarah, and BME Up Scotty. You can join these fine folks and get benefits like printable recipe cards for every episode, director's commentary with more of our thoughts and jokes and links for every episode, and more at patreon.com/spiritspodcast. Now, I've been doing a lot of traveling recently. I'm sure many of you are or are about to be. And there is nothing more comforting to me than remembering to pack soft clothes, as I call them, but, like comfy clothes, sweatpants, a sweatshirt for going on vacation. I know space is hard to come by and you got to prioritize like the clothes you have to wear, but there is nothing like wearing your comfy clothes and sitting in a hotel bed and watching your favorite comfort show. This was a holiday edition of Beat Bobby Flay. For me, there was a 6-hour-long marathon when Eric and I were at a hotel. And you know what? We watched 3 hours of it and fell asleep to it. And it was perfect. So I recommend being comfy in a hotel or on the road if you have to be and watching your favorite show. This week, we would love if you could follow Spirits on Instagram, Bluesky, and TikTok, or Spirits Podcast, and share one of the clips that we have been making from episodes with a friend. We make these clips because it's fun to share, some of our favorite moments from the show. Brenda's been doing a kick-ass job at editing those and sending them out, but we need your help mostly as a tool to use these things to convince new people to listen to Spirits. If you show them, a little 60, 90-second video and you're like, hey, if you enjoyed this joke, you will enjoy this podcast. We could not recommend that more. And it really helps us to grow the show. 8 years in, it's incredible that our show is still here and still rocking and rolling. And we need your help to keep adding new people to the journey. So follow Spirits, Bluesky, TikTok, Instagram, and share those clips. Thank you. This week at Multitude, it is a very exciting time because we have a brand new member show in the Multitude Collective. It's Tiny Matters. This is a fabulous podcast by Sam Jones and Deboki Chakravarty as they take apart complex and contentious topics in science and rebuild your understanding. Now, the title Tiny Matters is all about genes, microbes, other tiny stuff that have a big impact on our world. And it's also like spirits, it's a little bit of a double meaning, like matter, like it's small pieces of matter, but also that tiny stuff does matter. And I absolutely love this show. They have new episodes every Wednesday and is brought to you by the American Chemical Society, a nonprofit scientific organization connecting and advancing chemistry and the broader scientific community, and Multitude. So I am so excited to welcome them. I'm so excited for you all to get to know Sam and Deboki more. We'll definitely have them on the show. But go ahead and subscribe to Tiny Matters. Now, it's the time of year where we are all out there buying gifts or making gifts or crafting things for people. And I definitely have a couple people in my life that are really hard to gift for. And I feel like they either have all the stuff they need or they're just not interested in like the kind of regular stuff that I could find, at the mall or in a store. And so I genuinely love to go to Uncommon Goods to check out some of their suggestions and get some actually interesting gifts, unique, hand-picked. So many of them are handcrafted and made with small businesses. They are a fabulous resource if, like me, you find gifting a little bit challenging. Now, they also have uncommon experiences, which is awesome. There are like virtual classes, opportunities to have fun and connect in new ways, things that might interest you, conspirators, tarot card reading, lunar astrology charting, cooking and mixology classes, crafts, gardening. So for people who are like, I have all the things I need, I just want an experience, that's a really good one. And also doesn't require any carbon footprint of shipping it in the mail. So I love Uncommon Goods. I highly recommend that you check it out. And to get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/spirits. That's uncommongoods.com/spirits for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. We are also sponsored this week by Marley Spoon. And I know that when I cook, I find it challenging sometimes to break out of my rut of things that I make all the time. And I am looking for ways to be more creative and to try new things, which is why I really appreciate that Marley Spoon has a huge variety of recipes that you can choose from each week. From poached salmon to Cajun spiced chicken to butternut squash gnocchi, which are absolutely delicious, by the way. They are so pillowy. They taste like fall. I love those guys. You could also indulge in their festive meals and desserts this holiday season. So you can add premium proteins like duck breast with sour cherry sauce. My mouth is literally watering as I'm reading this. And crispy Persian rice. So if you're trying to make things special this holiday season, they are a really great option to look at. They have the best variety. And that's something that I really look for and find really important. So this holiday season, give the gift of great personalized food with Marley Spoon. Head to marleyspoon.com/offer/spirits and use code SPIRITS for up to 27 free meals. That's right, up to 27 free meals with Marley Spoon. One last time, that's marleyspoon.com/offer/spirits for up to 27 free meals. And make sure you use our promo code SPIRITS so they know we sent you. Do you feel like life just keeps getting more out of control? Do you regularly come across something that's terrifying or enraging, but you don't even understand what's happening about it? Are you frequently wondering if what you're coming across on the internet is even real? Well, there is a podcast that definitely can't make things better, but does definitely explain why we're all losing our minds. And it's called Panic World, where internet culture writer Ryan Broderick from the Garbage Day newsletter breaks down the biggest moral panics, conspiracies, and online witch hunts of the day. Guests that you may have enjoyed from other podcasts like Michael Hobbs and Akil Hughes, Panic World will let you laugh at the chaos that's running the world. Whether it's the Tide Pod Challenge, OnlyFans addiction, or Pop Crave's impact on the election, Panic World gives you the answers to the questions you wish you didn't need to ask. And now, back to the show.
Amanda, we're back, and I know the last time we covered Sekhmet, we paired her with the cocktail The Blood and Sand.
Oh, one of the best, Julia.
It's equal parts scotch, orange juice, sweet vermouth, and cherry hearing. But this time, I wanted to do a cross between that and a New York Sour, which is a cocktail that is defined by its red wine floater. Because while Sekhmet's stories tend to be blood-soaked, she also has other layers to her.
That's right. I also came into a bunch of Costco brand scotch recently. My dad does buy all of his holiday presents at Costco. They go over very well. And so I am going to need a reason to get through all this scotch. And that sounds like a perfect recipe.
I think it's going to work out great for you. Personally, I'm into it. So we have talked about Sekhmet and her worship, but what I love to talk about is kind of the function of gods and goddesses within Egyptian society. So Sekhmet in particular was a military goddess. The Egyptian kings loved the stories in which she was said to breathe fire to stop her enemies, and so they used her to represent their own power in battle, as well as worshiping her as their military patroness. So much so, Amanda, that the hot desert wind was often referred to as the breath of Sekhmet.
Delicious.
Isn't that beautiful? What an image, you know?
Just picture, like a cosmically large lioness chuckling or yawning, and then that's the like face full of hot desert wind that you get.
And like the idea of a predator breathing down your neck and feeling that hot wind as you approach the Egyptian armies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Ramses II actually claimed that Sekhmet rode with him in his chariot whenever he rode into battle, ready to destroy Egypt's enemies with her fiery breath.
Incredible image.
She embodied all of the negative qualities of the sun. So the aspects that could lead to, let's say, sunstroke or drought or famine and even epidemics.
Mm-hmm.
So this is why she is associated with illness, especially plagues. Certain illnesses were referred to as the messengers or the slaughterers of Sekhmet.
Damn. And isn't it cool to think of a lion waging warfare on like a microbial level? Like, isn't that just an inherently interesting sort of like spread of size?
I think it really reminds me of, there's several like stories. I'm trying to, in my mind, separate like fiction with mythology and folklore here, but the idea of like something breathing plague or breathing pestilence or breathing famine and just watching things wither and die in front of it is very like, I think the Nukkalevi has something like that. Good embodiments of the four horsemen of the apocalypse in a lot of fiction also has that kind of vibe to me. I think it's a really cool image for sure.
Me too.
So even though we have this association with illness, she was also the goddess that you would call upon to ward off pestilence. And she could, at times, function as a healing goddess, as I mentioned. And in this role, she was referred to as Sekhmet, Mistress of Life.
Yeah, that makes total sense that one of her aspects as somebody so closely tied to death is also going to be closely tied to life.
Yes, and I think that it is really important to always think about, like, I think about it in tarot a lot too. Like, even the worst card has a positive outcome to it. And so the idea of Sekhmet, yes, is the god of illness, but as the god of illness, of course she can heal that.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. And one in particular that I really like is she's also an archer goddess, which it kind of surprised me a little bit. In my mind, she's so like bloodthirsty that being an archer doesn't like fit the image I have in her of my mind. But it is something that a lot of her worshipers really feared because the 7 arrows of Sekhmet were believed to bring bad fortune. And also there were many spells and charms that were utilized to protect against the wrath of the goddess and her messengers. And these arrows were said to be the messengers that would inflict plague and destruction on humanity.
Hell yeah.
It's pretty dope. It's a pretty like dope image for sure.
So good.
So we already know that Sekhmet is sometimes her own goddess, sometimes the aspect of Hathor. And it is said that when Hathor is angry, that is when she takes on the bloodthirsty form of Sekhmet, who feeds on the blood and fear of her enemies. I like also that she's feeding on the fear of enemies. It's one thing to be bloodthirsty and just be like, I've tasted flesh and now I want more. But to feed on fear is very Pennywise the Clown to me.
It's also just an incredible image of her like sitting back on her haunches. I know she was typically depicted as a humanoid with a lion head, but I'm really picturing like full lioness with titties is just like what's in my head right now. And just sitting back on her haunches, like licking her chops, right? Just being like, your fear, it fuels me, baby.
No, I like that. I think that's a sexy image. And she was definitely portrayed as full lioness at times. Just much like a lot of the other Egyptian gods and goddesses, typically it was that kind of semi-anthropomorphic combination.
Listen, any combination of lion and woman, I'm going to find fearful and a little sexy.
Yeah. That's why we love a sphinx here on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But Hathor was not the only goddess that Sekhmet was associated with. As I mentioned before, Bastet is sometimes seen as the calmer side of Sekhmet, but sometimes she's also seen as the twin of Sekhmet, which I think is kind of cool, kind of fun. I'm also picturing, with twins, there's still one that's a little older. Sekhmet's obviously the older one, and Bastet is the second born.
Yeah, it's like the energy permeates.
Yes, but we mentioned New Year's celebrations earlier on when we were talking about, how everyone prepares for the new year in worshiping Sekhmet. This is also really interesting because one of the traditions for the new year was erecting a statue of Sekhmet dressed in red, facing the west, and then also having a statue of Bastet, which was erected right next to her, dressed in green and facing the east. So in this form, they sort of embody duality, with Sekhmet representing the lower Egypt, Bastet, the upper Egypt, and their roles as, vengeful and calming, illness and health, peace and war.
Amazing.
We also mentioned earlier her husband Ptah, who is another creator god, as I mentioned. He supposedly brought the world into being through the creative power of speech, which I love.
Oh, damn.
I love that he just spoke existence into existence.
We love a literary and speech-related god.
We do. And he's the god of artisans, which is so cute, I think, to pair with Sekhmet.
Oh my God, right? It's a real like grumpy cinnamon roll situation.
I'm a big fan of black cat golden retriever couples.
Yes.
And this is the vibe that I'm getting from that.
Oh my God, incredible. Rom-com authors, I know you're listening. Get on it.
So from Ptah, she gave birth to Nefertem, who I mentioned before, who represents both the first sunlight of the day and also the smell of the lotus or water lily.
Julia, lovely.
Yeah, because he was said to have arisen from the primal waters within this blue water lily or lotus.
Right? At daybreak of the Eye of Ra? Incredible.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. So while his mother is beautiful but also deadly, he was referred to as he who is beautiful and the water lily of the sun.
Oh my God. I love that the black cat golden retriever had a cinnamon roll son.
Yes. So he was also depicted as a lion-headed man at times, or as a beautiful young man with blue water lily flowers crowning his head.
Oh,
isn't that so nice? He's so sweet. What a good boy.
And I think if someone in the Memphite triad is a drag king and wants to be this lovely son with the blue lotus flowers, that would slay.
That would slay. Even a drag queen incorporating the blue lotus flowers and the blue water lilies, that'd be gorgeous.
Absolutely.
But Amanda, he was not Sekhmet's only child. She was also the mother of the lion-headed war god Mahes.
Okay.
Now, his name means he who is true beside her, and is associated with war, protection, weather, lotuses, knives, and devouring captives.
Whoa! We have a daddy's son and we have a mommy's son, and we know exactly what's happening.
You know how in cartoons where you see let's say like a dog character and a cat character get married, and then all of the kids, like all the boys look like the dad and all the girls look like a mom? That's kind of just this.
That's incredible.
So he was also known as Lord of Slaughter, wielder of the knife, and the Scarlet Lord.
Sounds like the perfect son of Sekhmet.
Yes, he was also said to, in the solar battle that happened every day on Ra's barge, he was one of the soldiers fighting off Apep, who is the chaos serpent.
Damn.
So 2 sons, both kind of representing both the more complacent side of their mother and then the other one, the more warlike side, which I really, really love.
Adorable.
It's so good, right? It's so nice. And finally, Amanda, we're going to end with our sort of foundational story here when it comes to Sekhmet. We've heard it before, but we will retell it with a little bit more emphasis on what exactly Sekhmet was up to. So you'll remember this as the story of the Eye of Ra and the destruction of mankind. That's the translated title for this. So as you may recall, Ra is getting old. He's getting corrupt. So the mortals begin to plan to rise up because they believe that he is no longer fit to rule them. There's an interesting part of this story too, where like Ra is like, I am getting too old. And I'm ready to retire and return back to the primordial waters. And then he gets wind of these mortals uprising. And he's like, you know what? Fuck that. Now I'm going to kill you all. Fuck you.
Yeah, that's fine.
So Ra finds out. It angers him, and so he sends down his eye, which in this story transforms into the goddess Sekhmet. So rather than the eye being Hathor, who then transforms into Sekhmet, the eye is literally the eye of Ra that transforms into this lion-headed goddess. Now, he tells her that she must strike down those who would rise up against him with a heat close to the sun's. So again, this idea of Sekhmet being this like hot wind of the desert, being able to breathe fire, which is why the pharaohs loved her so much. This is all coming from this foundational story here.
Also, it's not lost on me that like we have all seen somebody so hot that you're like, do I have a sunburn now? Like, oh, did I put on my sunscreen today? Oh my God.
I don't know if I've had that experience before. Is it just because you're blushing real bad, Amanda?
Yeah. And you're flushed.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's like the person is like a like magnetic force across the room. And you're just like, oh my, like I feel, you feel it. You feel it.
There you go. Maybe Sekhmet was so hot that she was just destroying people with her hotness. And it was all a metaphor.
I mean, it sounds about right.
Who can say? That lion with the hot titties.
You put an eye out with that thing. Put a pasty on.
Yeah, well, and then she does. All right. Actually, one scholar translates this next bit really well, so I'm gonna quote them. So, the desert was dyed red with human blood, while the eye was pursuing traitors and killing them one by one. It didn't stop until the sands were covered in bodies. Then, temporarily satiated, Sekhmet returned triumphantly to her father.
Wow.
This also reminds me of like when a cat deposits a nice little dead mouse as a gift for you at your front door, and you're like, now I just have this dead mouse.
That's the thing I had to deal with. And thank you, Toast. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, cat. This is definitely what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably how Ra was feeling around this, because it doesn't end there. Sekhmet's bloodlust is only temporarily satiated, and she is still drawn to kill every man or woman she comes across over the course of these next few days. She is slaughtering. She's out there slaughtering to the point where Ra is like, I think maybe we've reached the point of enough punishment. I think I don't want to destroy all of humanity, because then who's going to worship me?
Yeah.
Maybe we should stop. Thank you very much, but we're going to spare the rest of humanity. But the problem is, Sekhmet has been tasked to kill, and she really likes doing it. She does not want to stop.
Yeah, she's having fun. When does she ever get to slaughter all of humanity, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, like, let a girl party, you know?
Come on.
If you told her to do one thing and now you're mad that she's doing it, I mean, seriously?
I'm going to double down. I know.
Gotta double down. She really does double down. Because Ra orders her to stop, but to no avail, because, again, quote, his eye had tasted human flesh, and she liked it.
Right on.
Good for her. Good for her. What
also, it's not lost on me what a good drainage material sand is. And so for the sand to be filled with blood is like, holy shit, that's a lot.
Think of the beach. Now think of all of the wet sand. Now think of it.
Blood.
Just,
yeah,
blood.
It's a hell of an image.
And so Sekhmet keeps on killing. And so Ra has to come up with a plan, which he decides he's going to get her drunk on beer, which is her favorite drink. Besides blood, I guess. So Ra finds this red pigment in the desert. He gathers it up and he grinds it into a fine powder. And so he mixes it with beer, 7,000 jars of beer, I should mention, and takes these red beer jars and pours them into the Nile. I feel like it's always the Nile, baby. You know, if he had just left these jars of beer out, I don't think it wouldn't have been as appealing to her.
Well, yeah, because that's just a Costco size palette of like, imagine your favorite treat, Julia. Like you can have one and be like, tight, or then have two and then be like, I'll save those for later. But if it's like a vat the size of, again, a swimming pool or something filled with like, in my case, I don't know, goldfish, I'm going to gorge because I'm not just like tearing open the little packets. That makes me think about what I'm consuming. No. I'm going to jump face first into the goldfish, you know?
I feel like we have to specify that you're talking about the cracker and you're not just downing people's fish pets.
No, I mean, I'd probably be pretty stoked about like sardines, but no, goldfish snack cracker. That's
in my mind, the difference is going to a frat party, seeing people with red Solo cups, and then seeing the, I guess, bathtub full of jungle juice and saying, right, I got to get some of that. That's for me.
That's for me. That's for me.
That's the energy that Sekhmet is bringing to the party here. So he pours all of this red beer into the Nile. And when Sekhmet sees the Nile, now flooded in what looks like blood, she's like, yum, yum. Dives right in. She drinks it so quickly and so eagerly that she doesn't realize that she's too drunk until it's too late, which we've all been there.
Isn't that relatable?
We've all been there.
We've all been there.
All of a sudden that drink hits too hard and you're like, oh no.
Yep. We get up to go to the bathroom and go, whoa.
Whoa. Don't fall. Don't fall.
And folks, that's why, as you know, we do double fisting, water, and drink at all times. We drink responsibly.
To be fair, she thought it was blood. So, and also probably watered down blood because it's in the Nile. So the blood quantity can't be that strong.
We learn from her mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Well, she, after getting too drunk, falls asleep, which again, kind of the ideal situation.
I was going to say, very, very good use of time here.
Yes. This gives humanity time to flee from her, which is important.
Yep.
And when she finally awakes, she has forgotten all about her purpose of killing all of humanity and is very satiated, which I think is the best outcome after a night of drinking, honestly.
Yeah, right? It's not the waking up and saying I'll never drink again hangover. It's the one being like, I'm good for a bit.
Yeah. It's the like, whew, all right, cool. Yeah. Good night last night.
That was a good one. Yeah.
No migraine waking up. No nausea waking up. We're good.
No,
we're totally good.
You have all your credit cards and your phone not broken.
And I know where my ID is.
Incredible.
Success. Yes, I don't have to take a taxi back to the bar to hope that they'll give me my credit card or ID back.
Julie, the other day I went to a bar and like had a bunch of friends' drinks on my tab just because it was like very busy and it was easier to do that. And then when I went to close, they were like, I don't have a credit card for you. And I was like, I promise I had a tab. And then they like looked and they were like, oh my God, wait, somebody has a very similar name to yours. We gave them your card by mistake. So we're just going to clear your tab and like, I'm sorry, you have to replace your card. And I was like, oh my God, are you sure? I had like 4 people's worth of drinks on my tab and they're like, you're good. I'm sorry. So I'm like, okay. And then I had a free bar tab and, replaced my credit card and everything was fine.
That's great, but annoying.
It was, I don't mind the like, organizational replacement of, financial things like that. I can deal with that. I was more like, okay. So I like tipped them cash and walked away.
Yeah, that's simply, I would never have a credit card again. ADHD, woo!
We all have our strengths.
And much like Sekhmet, hers is recovering after drinking for a night out. So
bless her.
She wakes up fine. She returns to her father, Ra, who welcomes her back. He's just glad that she no longer wants to go on a slaughter fest. Mm-hmm. And he rewards her for her services.
I mean, this is a great outcome for Sekhmet.
Honestly, it is ideal for her.
Yeah.
I love that for her. There is another ending to this story, though, where Sekhmet, rather than waking up and being like, I guess I'll just go back to daddy, is really pissed out to find out that she has been deceived by Ra.
Sure.
And so she decides to just leave Egypt.
Oh.
But because she is the eye of the sun, she is the eye of Ra,
I mean,
her leaving the land diminishes the power of the sun, which threatens the power and the security of the world, throws Ma'at out of balance. All of a sudden, the sun is less powerful, so it's harder to grow crops and stuff like that. It is not a good situation for her to leave.
If any underappreciated eldest daughter is like, you know what? I'll stop. See what withholding your labor will do. Because I promise you, nobody is going to get clothed, fed, taken to school and soccer practice without you.
Much like a parent being like, no, I do appreciate you. Thoth actually is the one that has to go to her and persuade her to return, which then restores the sun to its full glory and restores Ma'at.
She just wants to be appreciated, guys.
Yeah. She wants to not be lied to, I get.
She wants to sometimes go on a bloodthirsty rampage and kill maybe too much of humanity.
All she's doing is listening to what her parent asked from her.
Oh, sorry, okay? I did my chores too good.
Wow, sorry that I finished my tasks earlier than you expected me to.
Sorry you told me to clean the floor and I cleaned it so much I sanded it off. What do you want me to do?
I'm just being efficient.
I relate too much to Sekhmet.
That's fair. Before you go on a little spiral here, Amanda, I'm going to say we're going to close the door on Sekhmet here.
Okay.
But don't worry, folks. We will be back to Denial Isn't Just a River in Egypt. It's also what we've been doing by keeping an Egyptian mythology series from you on Spirits Podcast by Spirits Podcasts on New Year's Day with another feline goddess.
Can't wait.
But until then, remember, when you're nursing a hangover from drinking all of the blood beer in the Nile, stay creepy.
Stay cool.
Later, satyrs.